Hi everybody. It's really good to see that this conference, the theme of it is human rights, because what COVID has really highlighted is, I think, the many wrongs that have been felt by autistic people and their families well before COVID impacted, but have been exacerbated by the pandemic. So human rights is a very real and very live issue, so it's welcome that we're incorporating that into our annual strategy conference. From an organisational point of view, Scottish Autism's operational arm really rose to the challenge of COVID, and our services adapted overnight, and the staff were really amazing, and to date our infection control has really been exemplary. And I think that shows, for me, it's the human elements that around these things that have been a real challenge, and how much we rely on our relationships with each other, whether that's between ourselves as professional people running an organisation and delivering a service, or between the supported people and those who work directly with them in services. The human elements in terms of people being able to visit their family have been a real challenge. We've really felt the emotion of that. And it's really impacted on our supported individuals and their families, and we're very cognisant of that. And it's a really difficult balancing act when you've got responsibility for people's health and safety, but you can see how much they're hurting in terms of missing their families and that usual routine and network of support. Like many organisations, we became part of the crisis response around COVID. We extended our advice line. We began opening 7 days a week from 8 AM to 8 PM. And again, it's credit to the staff that they just said yes, they just did it, and they just stepped up to the challenge. We had a series of Advice Line Plus and online events where we were picking the issues that were worrying people about COVID, such as wearing masks, being stopped for not wearing a mask, just adjusting to the changes in routine, and coping with all the uncertainty and managing the stress around that. So we tried to put information out there for people that was really coming from our advice line. We were picking up on the topics that were really of concern and worry to people, and we were trying to respond with clear information, and importantly with peer information, having autistic people on to talk to other autistic people and their families about their worries. We developed Facebook pages, closed groups where people could talk to each other and communicate and support each other. Autistic people, family members could have that dialogue. And we ran a series of Facebook Live events where people could in situ ask questions of different people coming in to talk about different topics. It was really important for us to think about the accessibility of that, and we added a live chat function to our website for people who find phone calls difficult. And it's one of those things that I'm pretty much kicking myself that we haven't done that long ago, because I know that the medium of using the telephone can be really difficult for people. But so that was a benefit of COVID, that expedited that, and we now have that, and we'll keep that feature. We also established a wee very low-key service called Call for a Chat, where people who were on their own, who were lonely, could book a regular call with one of our autism advisors and have some company. And I think that was really important in combating the loneliness and the isolation that some individuals certainly felt and experienced during particularly the harshest period of lockdown. And through all of that, we reached many people, large numbers of people, and you might have picked up on social media the amount of people that we reached is in the thousands. But rather than focus on those big numbers, I'd like to focus on the learnings from all of that. And the one comment that really keeps ringing around my head is a caller who told us, it has taken a global pandemic for people to notice that I am here. And I think that's a devastating indictment of our system. It's something that we know is there for people, that people's needs are not always to the fore, and that their needs are not being met. People are not always conscious of the support needs of autistic people across the community. But to hear that was really sobering. I could really have been doing with this help any other day of the week, but now there's a pandemic, somebody wants to reach out, and that really shone a light for me on some of the systemic challenges that were very present before COVID, during COVID, and will still be there after COVID unless we take the time to learn from that. So I'm really hoping that's what we can do. A really key learning for me was, excuse me, a really key learning for me was that what people often think of as low-level supports, those sort of community-based supports. We're not talking here about the people who need 24/7 support, who've got high care needs, who have got staff, permanently around them. I'm talking about people who need occasional support, but regular support with practical everyday things, and who really need people around them for when they need them. Those really came to the fore, and I don't want to do them down. I think planners and policymakers might think of these as low-level supports, but they're lifelines and they're vital for people, and I really do understand that. And we saw the whole range of that, whether that was people who really needed help to get food. They were really struggling to get food, and to get specifically the food that they can eat as autistic people with restrictive or avoidant eating patterns or restrictive diets. So, that wasn't just about getting food, it was about getting the right food and the food that looked right and was familiar to them. And also the emotional support element. When people felt in extreme suicidal, or when they just needed to reach out for human comfort. Through COVID, we had a mechanism for that to be there. And that isn't something that's valued greatly in the scheme of service design and service planning. These services have been, I think, hacked away at for many, many years, taking us to the point where people are generally driven into crisis before they get a service that they need. So I think there's a really timely lesson there, and the irony isn't actually lost on me, that it has taken a global health crisis to show us that proactive, preventative support from the right service at the right time can be really significant and can literally save lives. And I know that lives were saved through some of the interventions from our organisation through COVID, from people who reached out to us and who were in really dire and extreme situations. So my mantra has always been that people need people, and I think that really came to the fore through COVID. That's the bald truth of it. Yes, it's great to have things online, and I think that will necessarily be the way to go. But at the end of that kind of camera, there needs to be a person. Websites are not enough. Information leaflets are not enough. Autistic people need people just like any other individual. And importantly, they need people who understand why, yes, there's a bag of food at your door, but it's not any good to you because it's not the very specific foods that you need and that you can eat. And I think that the crisis has shown us that we need to think much more about connecting people to people for all different kinds of things, and that these sort of, as I say, maybe misnamed low-level services can really be very proactive and preventative and life-saving services. So it's my real hope that we can hold on to those lessons and that we can work with each other across the service providing and the autistic community and the policy landscape to think about how we transition out of COVID to a much better place, how we restore the faith of people in in support services, that if you need support, you will get it. We've got a lot to do to restore people's faith, not just because of COVID, but well before COVID. But I hope it's a time to reprioritise and think carefully about how we can actually connect people to meaningful support. And I think that what we've all learned is there is a need for systemic and sustainable change, that service reform is necessary, that we need to think differently about how we keep people from crisis rather than drive them into crisis, because that's the way you get a service. So those are some of the learnings that Scottish Autism had through the crisis, and some of my own reflections on it. And I look forward to seeing the human rights agenda being carried forward in Scotland, and as applying the many things that we learned during this, the worst of times. Thank you.